orientation, whatever. That is not acceptable for us in the Netherlands. And that is a position we will always defend. Open door, but yeah.
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has a question. Yes, at the back.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much to the panel. My name is Father Brian Omani. I'm a priest of the Archdiocese of Westminster in London, but I'm here studying. These questions are very pertinent to our pastoral ministry in London especially. I was very fortunate to work in an environment that Lord Bourne mentioned similarly with a homeless project in which we had several different Christian communities and subsequently then a local mosque also coming together to work for a street outreach and homelessness project. And it was a great joy to participate in these sorts of things. I guess the question I had put specifically to you, Your Lordship, but also to the rest of the panel, is that question when you speak about cohesion, when things go beyond simply participation in things which are to the good of the community, but then touch upon specific identities and those things which communities are asked to compromise beyond which they're willing to compromise. For instance, the rights of educational institutions to hold very specific educational precepts and understandings that may run counter to the cultural trend towards acceptance of things that certain religious groups will not compromise on. And the requirement to both uphold the law, but at the same time the right to defend what we teach and what we hold in charity always, and also in clarity. Where is that balance in the communities, and where is the difficulty, or how do you perceive that the difficulty is avoided, that when a community is, or at least feels they are not permitted to teach what they believe, that they then feel that they are embattled, and therefore they begin to retreat behind walls rather than reaching to other communities and say, well, this is where we stand and we're not going to move from there. And then you get an entrenchment into extremism. But also we have to be careful with words like that, because defining that, who defines extremism? Is it the other? And so these are the questions I'm interested to see. How do you go beyond just simply cooperation with communities for the good and hold on to those things which communities have a right to be able to hold and to teach within their own communities?
Thanks, yes. First of all, it's interesting, early on in my role as minister, I visited different centres and found the strength of interfaith cooperation incredibly strong. That was tested beyond the norm at the time of the terrorist attacks that we had in our great cities, Manchester and London. And because of the friendships that there were between people of different faiths and the resilience of the fact that interfaith was strong in those communities, they came through them in a way that I think amazed people. The country came through it in a way that amazed people. Now, you've raised a very specific question, which I think I understand, about education, and some of the issues that you touched on would be true of the Catholic community, would be true of parts of Orthodox Judaism, the Haredi community certainly, would be true of parts of the Islamic religion. So, say strangely, perhaps paradoxically, there would be parallels in different religions. So it's often that it's not creating difficulties between religions, amongst religions, it's creating very often, and I don't say this in a defensive way, but it's nice for everybody to be able to attack the government. And as you know, that happens on a regular basis. So there are issues there that we do need to have to think through, and you have touched on one very significant one. I don't think that the communities in question feel besieged. I mean, in fact, I'm sure they don't. I mean, Cardinal Vincent Nichols and provides strong leadership and talks about these issues, as you would know. So do other people in the Catholic community. We discuss these issues with Rabbi Pinter, Rabbi Gluck leaders in the Haredi community. They're certainly not frightened about bringing these issues forward. And we recognise there's an issue. But the importance of having the physics, the infrastructure there, that we're able to talk about them, to deal with them, and the underlying strength of knowing that you've got communities that are willing to talk to each other and to the government and the local authorities and so on. There are very real issues. I mean, we touched on some there. Some bring communities together. There are some massive issues that are behind all this we haven't perhaps gone into at great length, and I've written down here the role of the media, often far too negative, certainly in the UK, at a national level, not so much a local level. Social media, which probably has a global aspect, which I think we would all recognise the need to tackle some of the aspects of social media. Great movements of population migration that are happening, partly because of conflict, partly, I suspect, in the future because of climate change, which I've touched on. All of those are relevant to the way that our communities are going to shape up in terms of different races, different religions, which means that infrastructure, which we're seeking to put in a sort of very British, pragmatic way, is able to cope with some of the stresses and strains that are there. Not without challenge, but I think it's something that I think we're up for and can handle.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on that? Michael?
I would also like to underline that the enormous advances that we have seen in interfaith dialogue in the last, let's say, 2 generations is really one of the extremely positive developments that is often not sufficiently appreciated, because people take it for granted. I mean, as far as the German experience is concerned, when I look back on the generation of my parents, half of my own family was part of the great German flight from the former German East Territories, millions of people, one of the greatest refugee movements ever in the history of our species. And of course, many of these people were Protestants and ended up in Catholic parts of Germany. I mean, parts that were then 100% Catholic. I mean, there just wasn't any Protestant there whatsoever. And vice versa, people from Silesia who were mostly Catholic ending up, let's say, in northern Schleswig-Holstein, where there were only Protestants. And when you talk to people from this time, they always mention the tension that caused. The fact that, even though these were all Germans, one was a Protestant speaking a funny sort of German that because of a different dialect, but it's now having to live in a Catholic environment. And this has dramatically changed. And of course, it's been extended to this is just 2 Christian confessions. It's been extended to other religions, and this is something that I think we should recognize much more. Yes, this is a conflict between state and religion, and I tell you, there is no easy answer to that. I'm a lawyer. I happen to be also a practicing Catholic. I do not think that the fact that you voice an opinion under the heading, "This is my religious conviction," entitles you to do anything that, where it's not introduced in this way, would be illegal. Yeah, this is clear. And yes, there are situations, and we have situations. This is not a hypothetical case where that results in conflict. Well, that will then have to be resolved. This is, I don't think, a new problem. This is something that surely has always accompanied religion, any kind of religion, Christian religion, other religions. In Germany, as far as teaching is concerned, we have a different situation from I think, England. I'm not quite sure really, because we have a constitutional guarantee written into the Constitution, a right of the churches to operate their own schools. We have the right that in public schools, both the Christian confessions, the major confessions, and with the Jewish community have the right to offer teaching to children whose parents desire such religious teaching. So it's not like in the United States where Catholics go to Sunday school or Lutherans go to Sunday school. This is all part of, yeah, and this is guaranteed. So these are constitutional rights. They cannot be taken away. But of course that implies, if you want to some extent, a measure of control, because this is a public thing, right? I mean, you hear what a priest or a minister or a rabbi will teach, and yes, that can result in conflicts. And then I don't think there's any easy answer to that. You have to negotiate that too, on a case-by-case basis. But I think all of us here would agree that by law, you cannot say something or argue for something under the heading, oh, this is my religious view, and therefore I may say this, whereas if it were not my religious view, I couldn't say it. It would be illegal because I'm inciting racial hatred or I'm whatever. Yeah? So that, I'm afraid, is an unavoidable issue that we just have to work through and in everyday, many small individual cases where this question may arise. But I am afraid it is unavoidable. Thank you.
Thank you. We are slightly over time, so I just want to ask Farid or Karen